Hey guys, George at SoundTraxx here, and this week I'm coming to you again from the home layout. This time we're over in the staging yard, and if any of you guys have paid attention to our podcast, now with plexiglass shield to help prevent locomotives from taking a tumble to the ground. But anyway, the reason we're here is because over the last little bit I've done a locomotive here that was a GE, and I'm going to try something a little controversial here, so we're going to have a little fun with model trains. So, what am I talking about? Well, you'll have to stick around and find out. Let's get started. Now, if you've ever talked to a railroader over the years, especially one that's run trains, a lot of times you'll hear the phrase, GE should have stuck to washing machines. Now, what am I referring to? Well, especially in the 70s when GE was really making a push for the locomotive market, a lot of the railroaders didn't like the GE units for whatever reason. Now, in this particular next clip, we're going to talk to Kevin Love, the president of the Missouri Pacific Historical Society, and get his take on a GE locomotive and how it ran. So guys, I'm here at the St. Louis RPM, and we're just about wrapping up. And I know Tom and I were having a little fun on one of the podcasts recently, so if you're not watching those, why not? What's wrong with you? Anyway, tune into those podcasts. But anyway, we were talking about a former engineer for the Missouri Pacific, a gentleman named Kevin Love, who's the president of the MPHS. And we were talking about the in the podcast, we were talking about GEs loading up differently than EMDs. And so I wanted to bring Kevin in here to give a first-person perspective. And so, Kevin, you're over here. Introduce yourself, give a little history, and let us know. We'll talk about some GEs.
My name's Kevin Love. I started with Missouri Pacific in 1978. Pretty varied career. Started in Coffeyville, Kansas. Went to my hometown, Carthage, Missouri, after 6 months. Stayed there for 12 years or so, and then got an invitation I couldn't refuse to Kansas City. And I spent a lot of time on traveling switch engines and whatnot. And we hated. That was the joke the other day. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not a fan of GE. Today's units are not bad. The mechanical department's a little happier with them, but I just remember the old days. We didn't care for GEs. They're really slow to load, and there's a lot of quirks. There's a lot of things we didn't like. Missouri Pacific was very particular. Like I said, I spent a lot of time traveling switch engines on branch lines, and they were very particular about not using 6-axle locomotives because the track wouldn't be suitable in most locations for that. So we had 4-axle locomotives, which meant we had the U-23Bs, and then when they started playing around with the horsepower, and they upped them up to 30. Yeah, the B30s. But it was still a 12-cylinder engine. They just loaded slow. Especially when you were using a couple to a Jeep 15, those were race horses. Those suckers would jump off the starting block like no tomorrow. Especially the first batch. I don't know how they were wired differently, but those suckers would really, launch if you came out hard on the throttle. And GE, you just have to sit there and think about it.
Well, that's what's funny is we were talking about, because Tom and I both love the Jeep 15s. For whatever reason, it's like quintessential Missouri Pacific. They owned 190 of them total. And you had Jeep 15s, and then of course you'd get the B30s and the U30Bs and stuff like that. And so I'm going to use this as a example here to kind of show how we can mimic this in model railroading terms. So with this interview with Kevin, it's just a little short information to kind of let you know from a first-person perspective, and then come back to the studio with me, and we're going to go ahead and load it up and show you how it works. Thanks, Kevin, for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kevin, for taking the time to give us a little insight on what it took running these GE locomotives. So, here we are at the layout. I have my GE locomotive here in front of the GP15. And what I've done on these particular locomotives, a lot of people want to focus on speed matching and making sure everything runs exactly the same way. Well, what I've done to simulate what Kevin was talking about, how it took a little longer for that GE to load up and to get moving, I've actually used a different momentum rate in the GE locomotive here. And the reason for that is so that it takes a little longer to get going. Now, when we'll go into our settings here, so with these two locomotives, I have them consisted up and ready to go. Now, I'm going to show you what I've done, and it's not a drastic difference, but it's just enough to make it a little bit of more realistic, representing the locomotives, how they operate, and adding a little fun and a challenge to running your trains. Okay, so now I'm going to go into my settings, and first we're going to start with our GP15, and you can see here that we're going to go to speed settings, and then we're going to go to the speed settings set here at the top, and you can see that my acceleration rate is set at 75 and my deceleration rate is set to 150. Okay, pretty nominal speeds, not necessarily over the top, but it does give us some momentum to play with. So now we're going to look at our GE unit, and we're going to go into our GE settings and go into speed settings, and we're going to the top here at speed settings, and you can see that I have my acceleration now at 105. That's 30 points higher than it takes the GP15 to get going. And what is that going to do? That means this GE unit is going to take a little longer to get going, so the EMD is going to be pushing it a little bit down the line. Now, this is just a very small amount just to give a little bit of an effect. You can certainly, if you really want to simulate this, you can have a much wider difference going by about 50 points or so. But experiment with it and decide and see what you like. But how do they run together? Well, let's get started and let's find out. So we've got our brakes set. Go ahead and give it some throttle. You'll hear the engines notch up. And then when I release the brakes, that GP15 is pushing on the GE just a little bit because the EMD is loading up a little faster. And as our GE gets going, then the train gets running. And then once we get settled into speed, now the trains and now the locomotives run together perfectly, just like we want. And when we set the brakes, and I do realize they're off camera, but you can still see the caboose here. Once they set the brakes, they both stop at the same rate, since my deceleration and my braking rates are actually set to match. So I know this is a little bit of a different take on things, but I encourage you to try things out like this. You're not going to run a whole lot of cars off on the ground, just a little bit, just to add a little bit more fun, so that now you can kind of recreate more of the real world scenarios when you're running your trains. So we appreciate you guys tuning in, and before I leave, don't forget you can get your special SoundTraxx 35th anniversary t-shirt on our website at SoundTraxx.com. Supplies are limited, they're going fast, so make sure you get yours before they run out. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.